o Michael tratou nesse primeiro momento, fica à vontade também, mas a gente queria começar discutindo com ele a experiência dele em ajudar a fortalecer organizações que tratam da questão da avaliação em países. O Michael tem trabalhado há muitos anos nesse campo, né? Eu estava até me lembrando ontem, né? Eu fiquei pensando, poxa, quando foi a primeira vez que eu conheci o Michael? Aí foi em 1995. Pensa bem, né? 20 anos atrás, eu já comecei a me sentir velho, né? Mas quem tem neto nunca é velho, né? Então, nem me sinto velho. Mas eu lembrei, foi em 1995, quando ele organizou o primeiro encontro internacional entre a Associação Americana de Avaliação e a Associação Canadense, que foi em Vancouver. E ele sempre muito interessado com essa coisa. Ele foi presidente da EA e ajudou esse período de transição, né, quando a EA ainda não era a EA, eram organizações diferentes dentro dos Estados Unidos e que ele ajudou a fortalecer. Ele participou ativamente da criação da organização que junta diferentes países na África, né, também na área de avaliação, a FRIA. Ele mencionou aqui agora, no Japão também, ele contribuiu e contribuiu também para a criação do capítulo dentro do estado de Minnesota, que é onde ele mora, também da área de avaliação. Então, a gente gostaria que ele dividisse com a gente um pouco essa experiência dele, né? Quais foram os grandes desafios que eles tiveram para fortalecer essas organizações de avaliação nesses diferentes lugares, né? Que tipo de ideias, que dicas ele teria para que a gente pudesse avançar o campo da avaliação aqui no Brasil, né? Baseado nessa experiência dele. E depois ele vai aproveitar também para mostrar um videozinho que é sobre o ano dedicado à avaliação, que vai ser o ano que vem, né? O ano internacional é de avaliação. Eu vou deixar ele falar mais sobre isso, então. E depois vai estar aberto para outras questões que as pessoas queiram levantar.
Thank you, Thomas. And I think I'll actually begin with the video, because one of the organizing issues that we have found in the different parts of the world is building enthusiasm for evaluation's contribution as a part of sustaining an organization. And this is a promotional video for Eval Partners, is a group that is helping organize the International Year of Evaluation. I think part of building an association is a sense of professional identity, a sense of enthusiasm, a sense of community, and the spirit of that video and the opportunity of the International Year of Evaluation is very much a part of that. I teach a workshop for the Evaluators Institute on evaluation consulting, how to be an evaluation consultant. And one of the first exercises I have people do in that workshop is to come up with a 3-minute presentation if they're meeting somebody for the first time, and people get asked, so what do you do? And you say, I'm an evaluator. How do you explain who you are, what your niche is? And then they also have to come up with a little presentation that they might use with a funder, a foundation, a government. Again, what's called, as you've all heard, an elevator speech. If you just have a very short time and you're riding up the elevator, what can you say to someone? So they write it out, and people present it, and they get feedback on their presentations. And I've been doing this for years. And I've never had anyone who does that exercise mention that they're a part of a profession and a part of a professional organization. And then I tell them, the very first thing I always say when I'm meeting somebody who doesn't know anything about evaluation, I'm a part of a global community. There are evaluation associations in over 90 countries. There are 7,500 members in the United States. And people, what? So it's not just about me as an individual, that I'm a part of a community. And I find that piques their interest immediately. And they say, so what do you do? And there are two primary things that I emphasize that I think the profession and the associations end up dealing with. And it's partly to give an association some task to accomplish right away that helps propel the work forward. So that whenever I have a new client, I make my living doing evaluation. I have. I left the university in '91, and I've been on my own since then. So every client that I work with, I work for major philanthropic foundations, for nonprofits, governments, international agencies. I'm a breed that's disappearing. I'm an evaluation journalist, so I can work across any kind of program and anywhere in the world. But the thing I always give people first is a copy of the evaluation standards adopted by the Joint Committee. They call for evaluations to be useful, to be feasible or practical, to be ethical, to be accurate, and to be accountable. So one of the things that new associations have been doing around the world is translating the standards into local languages and then adapting the language to fit the local context. There are actually 40 standards, individual standards. These are the 5 groupings, but there are 8 utility standards, and I think about 15 accuracy standards, so that and then once the members of an association have discussed, looked at the language, dealt with the things we were dealing with this morning, what's the appropriate word for feasibility, for propriety? How do we say that in the language that people in our country would understand? And some countries have decided to leave out some items that they didn't feel were particularly appropriate or germane. And then they adopt the standards so that the association is able to say, this is what we stand for. So when I go to work with clients, I don't just say, I'm committed to making evaluation useful. Our profession has made their #1 standard that evaluations will be useful, and no matter how technically accurate an evaluation is, no matter how good the research is, if it's not used, it's a bad evaluation. And so I communicate, I'm a part of a global community that says, when people say, what's a good evaluation? This is what it is. And then the second thing that, especially next year, is going to be hugely important, and Eval Partners is playing a big role in, is so who can do this work? And that involves, oops, still getting there. All right, competencies. Traditionally, evaluators, when I came up, there wasn't even a field of evaluation. I'm part of that early generation that discovered evaluation and began to build the practice. But systematic inquiry is the set of competencies that has to do with methods, with analysis, with knowing how to do research. This is the research skills. And traditionally, that's all that evaluators were expected to do, was to know how to gather data and analyze data. What's emerged is that these are 6 areas of competency that are needed to actually be able to do useful evaluations, practical evaluations, ethical evaluations, and the kind of questions that you were asking about how do you do participatory work, how do you build evaluation in. That's not covered in research courses. So that professional practice is where the standards are located. Situation analysis means that you can figure out what kind of evaluation is appropriate for a situation. So that's a lot of what we talked about earlier. Is it formative, summative, accountability, developmental, etc.? Reflective practice means that we evaluate our evaluations to learn from them, to get better at what we're doing, that's a commitment. Interpersonal competence, that we can, that's the gesture role, that we can interact with people in power, that we can interact with people in communities, that we can work with people. And finally, this is hugely underestimated. Evaluators need management skills. There's a lot to manage. There are timelines to be met. There's money to be spent on time. When I've been called on to review evaluations that have gone bad, and unfortunately I do get that role sometimes to help foundations and others figure out why did this become such a disaster, it's almost always because of weak project management skills. Knowing how to do research doesn't mean you know how to manage a research project. And evaluators are legendary for missing timelines, missing deadlines. And use often depends on meeting the deadline. No matter how great your evaluation report is, if it's not there when the decision gets made, it's worthless. So a part of what the International Year of Evaluation will be is building capacity around the world. 3 countries, only 3 countries in the world that I know about right now, have decided as associations to actually certify evaluated competencies. Canada is doing it on a voluntary basis. People can go through a process, and this is the framework that they're using. Japan is requiring it. To get government evaluation contracts, you have to be certified in Japan. And New Zealand is experimenting with Kate McKeag based on a Canadian approach. So whether it's a formal process, whether it's a voluntary certification, but it basically, part of what an association does is begin to bring 2 kinds of standards. What's a good evaluation? Who's a good evaluator? And supports the idea that we're a profession, that we have standards, that we have capacity expectations. That means we do training, so associations help build capacity. They help build the capacity to do high quality evaluations and to make them contextually sensitive and relevant. Creating materials in the local language, translating books and papers and things like the framework into the languages that people can use within their own countries. So what I've seen a number of associations do, including AFRIA, the African Evaluation Society, Japanese Society, the German Evaluation Society, is the first thing that they did officially was to review the standards, translate them, and adopt a set of standards to say we are part of the global community. AEA also has guiding principles that one can look at. But there is an international association for standards that the Joint Committee for Standards belongs to. And in order to have good standing, in order to have your standards certified by the International Association of Standards, the member organizations of the international community have to go through a standards process that they lay out. So it means things like having a period of time where people can discuss the standards online or in conferences that you have, where they can give feedback, where they can talk about what's missing or what language doesn't work or how to translate. And then there's a formal adoption process to say that you're a part of it and to decide at what level and in what way you help build capacity. So what we found in the associations I've been a part of, that when people want to know, well, why would I join? What would be the value of it? A part of what I like to emphasize is not just this is what you'll get out of it individually, but that if you join and become part of it, we as a community can increase the standing of evaluation together in our country. Say that we stand for something, that we represent something, and it remains, this is my campaign, that what I'm dedicating myself to in 2015, is my rough estimate, there isn't good data on this, but as I talk to people and look at what goes on in the world, most evaluations in the world are conducted by people who don't know there's a profession, who don't know there are standards, who don't know there are competencies. The World Bank commissions thousands of evaluators, and if you're a PhD economist, you're qualified to do evaluation. And they do horrible things that reflect negatively on all of us. This is like the problem that universities have in general. If you have a PhD in anything, you're supposed to therefore be a good teacher, a good administrator, a good researcher. Actually, what you have is a PhD, which makes you a PhD. Doesn't make you a good teacher, doesn't make you a good administrator, doesn't make you a good person. It makes you a person with a PhD. End of story. Those other things have to be learned. And so part of what we can do as association, I'm working now, and Eval Partners is going to take this on with Tessie. I've just written a proposal that she's bringing to Eval Partners and IOCE to create standards based upon the Joint Committee standards and the competencies, to create standards for evaluation site visits. Because most evaluations done by the World Bank and international agencies and UN agencies are these midterm and end of project site visits where a team gets put together and goes in for 3 days. And you know what the number one standard is that we're proposing for site visit standards? Have a damn evaluator on the team. Have somebody doing evaluation who actually knows something about evaluation. A radical suggestion. A radical suggestion is that people doing evaluation site visits ought to know there are standards, ought to know something about evaluation. That's part of what a professional association promotes, and that when I've been a part of these processes, we've needed to be able to explain both what individuals get, but what the association offers in our contribution to the world, and whether it's these two tasks or something else that you decide is relevant, I think it's helpful to have an agenda of what you're going to work on together. Let me stop with that.
Thank you very much, Michael. Bom, gente, perguntas complementares sobre esse assunto? Tá, a Tereza já tem uma.
I'm not sure I speak a good Portuguese. Well, eu quero falar... Eu tenho várias, vou ser esperta, vou botar tudo junto. algumas perguntas. Primeiro, como é que você relaciona Guiding Principles and Competencies? Guiding Principles being recommended, muito recomendados os princípios guia da avaliação e as competências. Eu quero ver como você faz essa relação. Uma outra pergunta vai junto, como envolver as universidades. Elas estão absolutamente caladas em termos de avaliação. E quando se fala de avaliação, parece que já sabem o que é. Dizem que os juízes são as pessoas que acham que estão certas, que sabem tudo, acham que sabem. E os desembargadores, aqueles que têm certeza de que sabem tudo. O que acontece na universidade? A universidade parece que tem certeza de que sabe tudo sobre avaliação. E, no entanto, não há nem sequer formação nisso. Ligado com isso, sim, vou ligar. Ligado com isso, nós temos a questão de quando você diz um avaliador no time, na equipe, nós sabemos que, quando falam de um avaliador, vem uma pessoa que entende de medidas e acha que isto é um avaliador. Sabe fazer provas, sabe fazer questionários, então é considerado um avaliador. Esses erros nós estamos encontrando. A última coisa que eu quero perguntar, junto, é essa questão do system thinking. Tomás tinha falado de como traduzir alguma coisa, e nós temos dificuldade de traduzir system thinking. Não sei qual é a melhor maneira de traduzir esse sistema, pensamento, o que é.
Pensamento sistêmico, né?
É o pensamento sistêmico. Não sei, eu estou traduzindo, estou dizendo sem saber. A mesma coisa que acontece com propriety, que nós estamos traduzindo como ética, porque diz que deve ser ético e legal. Então, ético se entende melhor por propriety, em português, do que propriedade. Chega.
Obrigado, Tereza.
Eu gostaria... Quer dizer, a gente está nesse movimento... Pode? Melhor responder. Não, eu queria que você falasse um pouco sobre o desafio da sustentabilidade de uma organização, de uma associação dedicada à avaliação. Eu sei que a Associação Americana viveu esse desafio e como é que ela superou isso. Não é só financeira. É como manter as pessoas envolvidas nessa missão de promover a avaliação no país e de organizar isso tudo. A gente tem muita dificuldade em manter as pessoas fazendo isso voluntariamente.
Part of the reason I wanted to begin with the video and with the standards and the competencies is that change in all kinds of arenas does ultimately depend upon leadership. People who have a vision and want to see that vision in the world and are willing to work at that. And so I think that's part of the reason that as volunteers, the people who step forward and get a vision for the contribution of evaluation to their own countries and to the things that they care about and can create with others a network of support, a group that supports them in that so that it's not an individual out there by themselves, but that they have a support network and people watch out for each other, but that they stay in touch with that larger vision of what's going on and why evaluation is important. So the people in an association have the responsibility to nurture their leadership, and the leaders have the responsibility to keep the vision alive that makes people want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And that means highlighting the ways in which evaluation can make a contribution to whatever the issues of the day are. Which relates then to Teresa's question, I think, about how these things interconnect, the principles and the standards and the competencies, bringing people along in systems thinking and positioning it in universities. The the pioneering visionary thinking in this regard has been led by Michael Scriven. And while we disagree about some things, we've gotten to be friends over the years, and we've debated over the years. But Scriven is positioning evaluation not just as a profession, but as what, and this is especially in relation to universities, as what he has called and is writing about as a transdiscipline. Not interdisciplinary, not cross-disciplinary, but transdisciplinary. And transdisciplinary means a transdiscipline is a discipline that is so fundamental that every other discipline actually needs it. So there are two primary transdisciplines at this point. This is an agreement. She's accompanying me with music here. Statistics is a transdiscipline. Every field needs and uses statistics, so it's not just in one discipline. It's a transdiscipline. Philosophy is a transdiscipline. Every field has to deal with philosophy of science and the nature of philosophy. Scriven argues...
It's different transdiscipline from metadiscipline or meta-theory.
It's... I think he would accept meta-discipline. He's using the word trans because he's using the word meta for meta-evaluation, evaluation of evaluation. So trans means it cuts across.
In the case of philosophy that you mentioned,
Yeah. It would,
philosophy could be think like meta theory, or not.
in the transdisciplinary sense, he's primarily thinking about philosophy of science. That what is science? What is a discipline? How do you make the case that a particular body of knowledge constitutes a discipline? Every discipline has to deal with that. Every discipline uses statistics. Even humanities are now using statistics. And he's also then arguing that evaluation, even though most disciplines don't recognize it, peer review is an evaluation process that is largely badly done. And that's become a cause célèbre for Scriven. But it's also become a big issue in medicine. The major medical journals, Lance and the New England Journal of Medicine, they've come to recognize that most of what they publish is filled with errors. And they're spending more and more of their journal time retracting articles that weren't properly reviewed. That peer review within universities is a corrupt process for tenure and promotion. Well, those are evaluation issues. Student achievement, judging student performance is very badly done because people have no evaluation expertise about how to actually do it. So the transdisciplinary argument is that there's some core things to know about making judgments, about identifying criteria, about bringing data to bear on criteria that transcend subject matter specialization. That it's a subject matter specialization in itself. And so part of, I think, what an association helps articulate is that specialized nature of knowledge, that there is a body of knowledge about how to do those things, and that people who are making judgments but lack evaluation training and evaluation thinking are likely to not do a good job of making judgments. So it comes together in a sense in saying there is a body of knowledge about doing evaluation, and that specialized body of knowledge transcends other specialized subject areas as a way of thinking, as a way of understanding the world, and that's part of what an association is able to promote, help its members with, build the capacity to do, and attempt to influence university training and the location of that, which means that, and that's part of Scriven's vision, outside of places like Western Michigan, where Tomas was, where there's a separate evaluation center. Most evaluation courses are within a subject matter area. It's in education, or it's in public health, or it's in criminal justice. And the real vision of evaluation is cutting across. When I ran the center at the University of Minnesota, we had staff from 17 different departments. We never allowed evaluation to become a sociology issue or an education issue. It was evaluation as a cross-cutting issue. And only an inclusive association can make that argument, that there's a body of knowledge here globally about how to think evaluatively that is a part of the future of the world. And we're going to make judgments about things like climate change, about disparities across the world. There's ways of thinking about that go beyond ideology and politics. And that's been the vision of evaluation's contribution. So I think associations bring, when they serve well, that vision, and in a way that's not too arrogant but not too humble. That we say, not on behalf of ourselves as individuals, but as a body, as a group. So I don't go around saying, I, Michael Patton, know what to do here. I always say, I'm part of a profession of people around the world. I'm very excited about the International Year of Evaluation. And I say, I have become a part of a group that's now in 90 countries of people who are bringing a kind of thinking to things that say we can do better. And that you can only do better if you work at it in a certain way. So that's what we have to offer, and to have examples that are contextually specific of what our contribution is. The association helps gather those examples, train people in them, how to talk about evaluation, and to make it meaningful.
Alguém mais? Pode ser qualquer tema sobre avaliação. O Michael sabe tudo. Marcia thinks you haven't answered her question appropriately. So could you talk a little bit more about sustainability of an organization? How maybe you can bring some examples from the American Evaluation Association, the transition that they did. And
so my sense of it is that there's not a structural answer to sustainability, that it is the motivation of the people who care about this and the group of people who come together to support that ultimately what I think sustains networks and associations goes back, and this reflects my own disciplinary training in sociology, perhaps, the fundamental sociological knowledge for nearly 100 years now about groups that hold together is that they're doing two things. They have a sense that they're accomplishing some tasks, and they're smoothing relationships. So there's a relationship side to groups, and there's a task side to groups. What we would say in evaluation, an outcome side and a process side. And so associations that work have to attend to both of those things, and sometimes, in fact often, those are two different roles that different people have to play. So somebody has to worry about, what are we going to do as an association? That's where the standards come in. That's where the competencies come in. What are we going to be known for? What are we going to produce? What do we say we're accomplishing? So those are the task-oriented people. The process-oriented people are the people who worry about, what food are we going to have when we get together? Who's going to supply the food? What music? How do we connect people? When we see that somebody isn't attending, how do we find out? Why aren't they coming? What are the relationships that we're trying to build? How do we express appreciation for people? How do we acknowledge their contributions, that they're working very hard and that they deserve recognition? So sustainability means finding a balance between both getting tasks done and getting relationships built. And organizations that don't make it end up going too far one way or the other. So that there are people, and you all know them, who hate process. And they say they hate process, and they're proud that they hate process. They say, I just want to get stuff done. I don't want all this talking and all this relating. I just want to get stuff done. And then there are people on the other end who are huge process people and don't seem to ever get anything done. Well, we need both kinds of people. We need them to be working together, and we need people who can do some of both. So the organizations that seem to have a long history attend to both of those functions. And a part of the time that associations tend to come apart, not go very well, is when they're not getting anything done, so people get frustrated with why bother, we're not getting anything done. I've seen that happen. And on the process side is when conflicts emerge and there's nobody with the skills to manage the conflicts. AEA almost came apart because we went through a period in the 90s where there were 4 successive presidents who hated each other and board members who took sides. And it got very nasty for a while. And it wasn't a productive time. So the membership really didn't know very much about that. Fortunately, at that point, the conference mechanism was in place so that the conferences went on. Susan Kistler took care of that. Gene King was the conference chair. And they survived by ignoring the politics of the board, saying the conference is too important, the association's not going to get anything done while these people are doing their dance and fighting amongst each other. And then we got past that. And for the last several years, we've had really good presidents who work together, good boards. And the primary challenge, actually, that the American Evaluation Association faces right now is how to be part of the global community, is what AEA's role is going to be internationally in a way that doesn't bring forward all the worst traits of Americans, but where the AEA doesn't become so in the background that they don't feel they can make a contribution. So trying to make a contribution without being domineering and without being controlling, but at the same time being really a part of a global community. So AEA has moved through different challenges over time. The very first meeting, Tomas talked about my being there at the beginning, there originally were 2 organizations. And it's the date that I date the profession from is 1975, when we started. 1975 is the year that the Canadian Evaluation Society was formed, the Australasian Evaluation Society was formed, and 2 American groups, the Evaluation Research Society, which was an academic group, and the Evaluation Network, which was a practitioner group. The first Evaluation Network meeting was 35 people in Aspen, Colorado. The first Evaluation Research Society meeting was 20 people at Harvard. We merged when I was president in 1984 and created the American Evaluation Association. So the granddaddies are the Canadians and the Australasians. So I'll tell you the shadow side of sustainability. This is not well known and widely known, so I'm bringing you into the underbelly of your question of sustainability. Much more interesting. The Australasian Evaluation Society almost went out of business. They brought me over. I did workshops around the country for them for 3 weeks, and they charged a lot, and there hadn't been workshops before. They made a lot of money, and they had other people They got early capacity building and figured out a model where they made a lot of money. An entirely voluntary organization. They had never had their books audited. They had a volunteer treasurer, a man from Scotland who volunteered to manage the books, and a new president was elected to AES who was an auditor. She was from the audit side of government. And she said, we can't be a professional association and not have our books audited. And the treasurer was insulted. He said, I give hundreds of hours to this association, and you don't trust me to keep good books? And she said, it's not a matter of trust, it's a matter of professionalism. Organizations don't run on trust. How can we be an evaluation organization and not have our books audited? And she insisted, and he tried to put it off. Well, as you may begin to get a sense of, they had over $2 million. He had embezzled all that money. He had bought a ranch in Western Australia. The society was bankrupt. They were supposed to, Tomas, be the third party in Vancouver. And the reason they got the books audited was about 1993, is they were supposed to be an equal partner. Canada, Australia, and the US were going to do the Vancouver conference together. Australia found out they had no money. They were about to bring charges against him, and he committed suicide. And then they got into legal proceedings to try to recoup the assets. And to this day, because they missed 1995, they really have been, they weren't then a part of 2005. They've regrouped. They're still having a good annual conference, but they had to really start over again. So I guess one piece of advice is to have an audit of the books once you start charging fees and charging for workshops and doing those kind of things, that you, because trust only goes so far. It's, we call it trust and verify. And so that's the shadow side of evaluation. We've also had, in a couple of different countries, the problem of individuals forming associations for their own benefit, saying that they represented the country, and using the association's name to further their own consulting business. That was a problem in a couple of countries, that until people got a more general association, because nobody really had the authority to say what the association was or was not. So, you know, it's not all just positive. But in the end, it is about finding the people who are committed and then supporting them and providing for turnover. I mean, sustainability is that you have to have a way of replacing people. So one leader shouldn't be expected to do 10 years. You know, that people sign up for a couple years, and that a part of the job of the members and of the core group is to be worrying about sustainability, is to be worrying about succession. Who's going to come on next? How are we going to be sure that somebody else steps up? Because we didn't have, at the time that I became president, we didn't have a constitution, we didn't have bylaws, all of that got put into place. The final piece, the story I'll leave you with, that may be a part of the language piece and a contribution, but when I was president, this was in '84, the membership application for AEA, so for the Evaluation Research Society Evaluation Network, and then AEA. The membership application asked you what your professional identity was. And the options were sociology, economics, education, public health. There were about 20 disciplines listed. Evaluator was not one of them. So the American Evaluation Association did not have a way for people to say, my primary identity is evaluation. We were still in the mindset that the discipline is first, and then evaluation is secondary or tertiary. So one of my big innovations was to actually make it possible for a member of the American Evaluation Association to identify as an evaluator. And it was only about 2 years ago that for the first time, over half of our members had evaluation as their primary identity. So that's one of the things you promote. You got. I hope that gets closer. It's a tough question. I guess the answer is worry about it and attend to it.
Yeah, well, we are running out of time. Is there any other quick question at the end? Okay, so
Let me just add that the video is online. It's a YouTube. So any of you in your organizations, anywhere you are, what would they search? It's called Who Are We? We are.
oh, just Eval Partners,
Yeah.
Pesci Katsambas, video, evaluation 2000.
Thomas will get it out to you. So
Yeah.
I don't see it. We'll get it out to you. But let me encourage you to begin promoting the International Year of Evaluation as a part of the association, and download and use the video wherever. It's widely accessible and gives it's a way to start letting people know we're part of something big here next year, and each of you is a part of that global community. And maybe you make one here in Brazil with samba music, so you do your own. They've got your pictures today, so they can splice them together, you see. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Michael. Eu queria só pedir a Mônica para fechar aqui como dona da casa e Márcia também depois.
Bem, em nome dos nossos colegas aqui da Fundação Roberto Marinho, eu queria agradecer muito a presença de todos vocês aqui, a generosidade do Patton, que veio para um evento que a Fundação está organizando segunda-feira, mas se dispôs a estar a convite da Rede Brasileira de Monitoramento e Avaliação essa manhã aqui conosco. Então, em nome aqui dos colegas e dos brasileiros, eu queria agradecer sua generosidade e aproveitar e falar um pouquinho que a Fundação vem fazendo um movimento já há mais ou menos aí uns 10 anos de tentar contribuir para essa reflexão no Brasil sobre a questão da avaliação. Vários colegas nossos aqui já trabalham com isso há muitos anos. Temos parceiros como Tereza e outras pessoas da área de avaliação que contribuem para essa reflexão, mas de uma forma um pouco mais organizada. A gente começou a organizar aqui no Brasil alguns seminários internacionais. Já estamos indo para a 3ª edição. O foco do nosso seminário é sempre discutir a avaliação no contexto do investimento social privado, uma agenda um pouco mais específica do que a rede vem fazendo. A gente também está junto com a rede, mas esse nosso seminário que trata de avaliação e investimento social privado vai acontecer agora pela 3ª vez, em agosto, aqui no Rio de Janeiro, na Firjan. Eu já queria convidar todos vocês. Esse ano a discussão vai ser muito focada sobre a questão da avaliação e da política, organizacional das fundações, das empresas, das instituições. É uma iniciativa da Fundação Roberto Marinho, da Fundação Itaú Social, conta com o apoio da Fundação Maria Cecília Souto Vidigal, da Fundação Santiliana, e temos a parceria técnica da MOVE e da Colmeia, aqui do Tomás. Nesse encontro que a gente vai ter para discutir estratégia organizacional e avaliação, a gente vai contar com 3 avaliadores internacionais. Um deles é o Thomas Cook, que é da Stanford University e professor da Northwestern University. A Patrícia Rogers, que é doutora em educação pela Universidade de Melbourne, é professora de avaliação do setor público de uma universidade na Austrália, RMIT, e diretora do projeto Better Evaluation. E a gente vai ter a Tessie Katsambas, que apareceu aqui no vídeo, que o Patton acabou de mostrar para a gente. Ela é bacharel em Economia e Ciência Política, mestre em Políticas Públicas pela Harvard University. Ela tem 25 anos de experiências em planejamento, avaliação, etc. Então, vai ser no dia 6 de agosto de 2014, na Firjan aqui do Rio de Janeiro. A gente espera todos vocês. Em breve, a gente vai mandar um convite. Divulguem, é um evento gratuito, né, onde a gente recebe instituições, ONGs, fundações, avaliadores, consultores, todos aqueles que estejam interessados em discutir essa temática com várias workshops e algumas palestras, tá bom? Então, passo agora para a Tereza, para Márcia.
Bom, eu queria dizer que eu estou muito feliz e dizer que foi muito importante, foi muito bom ter o Patton aqui, ouvir tudo, porque às vezes a gente reflete nas leituras, na prática, mas ouvir o tamanho da sua experiência é um presente mesmo. Muito. Queria agradecer à Fundação, o Tomás, o Ricardo, pela organização disso. E também queria fazer o anúncio do evento da rede, né? O evento da rede vai acontecer esse ano em Porto Alegre, entre os dias 19 e 21 de novembro. O formato do evento, todos os anos, esse é o 6º seminário nacional anual. O formato é sempre o primeiro dia de minicursos, entre 5 e 6 minicursos. Vai ser a primeira vez que o CLIER Brasil, que é um centro regional recém-criado no Brasil, vai oferecer um minicurso. Acho que nós vamos ser a primeira atividade deles. E, então, dia 19, minicursos, e 20 e 21, as mesas redondas e debates. Já estão abertas as inscrições para os trabalhos, para inscrever trabalhos. Elas se encerram no dia 30 de junho. Tem todo um comitê científico trabalhando no seminário e a gente espera vocês lá também. Então, já tem programação para agosto, para novembro, né? E a gente queria pedir uma foto com o Patton para registrar esse momento, para a gente poder publicar.
Tá ótimo. Gente, muito obrigado, então, mais uma vez. É um prazer imenso, uma alegria ter tido essa oportunidade e dizer que eu acho que a gente está, pouquinho em pouquinho, construindo aí uma história aqui no Brasil, onde o campo da avaliação vai se tornar mais melhor, né, eu acho. E vai poder contribuir de maneira mais significativa para tornar esse país um país ainda melhor. Então, muito obrigado a todos e vamos tirar, então, a foto. Patton, com você. Obrigado.